So, hello, this is Jelani Nelson with us today from UC Berkeley. Hi, Jelani.
Hi.
So, let me get started with asking you, how are you doing?
Mostly doing fine. I guess now, I've forgotten about COVID. The news now is all about George Floyd.
And are there quite a few protests outside where you are? And
Yeah,
have
there were some huge protests in Oakland. There was actually a curfew across the whole county that in some cities is still ongoing. In Berkeley, the curfew ended last night. In Oakland, I think the curfew ends next week. There are some other, like San Leandro, or no, it's not next week for Oakland. Sorry, I think they said it's to be determined when the curfew ends. They haven't decided yet when to end it.
did you participate in any of the protests, or did you
I did not. No.
did you peep out to see kind of what was happening, or did you have to go out to get some provisions for yourself and family? Or
I think the protests weren't happening. They were not like super close to where I live. I would have to drive to there, so I didn't see them in person. I have been going in and out of the house to get groceries, and also to go hiking with my daughter.
so, how is the COVID situation there? How would you describe it? Is it a complete lockdown? Is it kind of moderate restrictions? And with the
Um,
curfew, did anything change?
yeah, so with the curfew was only put into place a couple days ago, and at least in Berkeley was lifted last night. Um, I was never out after the curfew, so I couldn't tell you. My wife she's a medical resident at a hospital in Oakland. So she comes home late at night and she goes to work early in the morning. So like when she came home last night, for example, it was around maybe 9:30, 10 p.m. and the curfew started at 8 p.m. So she was out after the curfew. But healthcare workers are exempted from the curfew. And actually, anyone who's going to and from work is exempted from the curfew. She said that when she was on the surface roads, all the roads were empty when she came home from work last night. But as soon as she got on the freeway, there were a bunch of cars, probably other people coming home from work.
So, the fact that your wife is a healthcare worker, you must be witnessing this COVID situation quite up close, and it must be quite personal to you, no?
Yeah, I mean, she had some ICU rotations recently, 2 weeks worth of ICU rotations, and she said she had to interact with several COVID positive patients. So yeah, it's real.
Yeah, high respect for her, actually. That's amazing. So then, when she's at work, is there like a lot more work at home for you? And how is your research getting? Is it kind of affected, or how are you managing everything?
Yeah, so her schedule is something like 3 weeks of like mostly ward duty, where she works 6 days a week, um, around 15 hours a day, and then the fourth week would be like clinical duty, where she's only at work maybe 9 to 6 or something like that, 8 to 6, and then she's off on the weekends during those weeks. So she does work a lot. For me at home, we got very lucky. Kind of as soon as we moved here, we moved to Berkeley about a year ago. As soon as we moved here, we started looking for a nanny, and we found one the end of February. COVID, the COVID panic had sort of just started, but it wasn't really in full effect yet. I mean, nothing was shut, at least in the U.S., nothing was shut down yet. So we found one who now she lives with us 5 days a week. So she comes Sunday night, and she goes back to her sister's house on Friday night. So basically Friday night to Sunday, I'm usually on my own watching. We have two kids. One is 2 years old, one is 7 months old. So I'm usually on my own taking care of them over the weekend because my wife works on the weekend. Like for example, this weekend, she'll be working both Saturday and Sunday. But during the week, we have help with at least watching the kids. I mean, other home chores, I guess I do, but those are less intense, like doing the dishes or doing laundry, stuff like that.
And I mean, independently, does the current situation affect your research, not just because of maybe the extra stuff at home, but even otherwise?
Um, yeah, I would say maybe somewhat, not a huge amount. I mean, in my group right now, I'm advising one graduate student, one postdoc. You know, we have meetings on Zoom, but we don't have the like impromptu meetings that one would have seeing each other in the hallway.
Mm.
I guess that's fine. And the tools for online collaboration are okay, but I prefer a big blackboard or whiteboard. You know, so um, I mean, I think it's okay. Actually, me and a student just submitted a paper yesterday to NeurIPS. So I guess things are still moving
Still,
along.
that's pretty cool.
Yeah, but if we hadn't found that live-in nanny right now, she started March 1st, and we were looking, as I mentioned, we were looking for one even before COVID, so it was kind of lucky timing, and it was lucky timing for her too, because previously, before she started working here in our home, she was working at a daycare center. She was one of the daycare teachers at a daycare center, and they shut down. So yeah, it's lucky for like the timing was good for both of us, I guess.
That's fantastic. Yeah. Otherwise, I can imagine that it would have become quite stressful during these times, maybe.
Yeah, a lot of people are losing their jobs. I think the U.S. every Thursday morning we have this unemployment report, like how many people filed for unemployment over the last 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And then the first Friday, I believe, of every month is the big jobs report. So that came out this morning today. Oh no, tomorrow morning. It's gonna come out tomorrow morning.
Mm-hmm.
So we're gonna see, but I think I saw some news articles saying that about a quarter of the usual like labor force in the U.S. is now unemployed.
Right.
Yeah, a lot of people are losing their jobs.
Yeah, these are.
I guess I'm very lucky, and my wife and I are very lucky that we have not lost our jobs.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, really, there is reason to feel lucky during these times for some of us who have these jobs and we can still continue to pay our bills quite okay.
Hmm.
And did the, I mean, did the teaching etc. also change quite a bit during the semester? When did all this change for you? And what part of the semester were you in when the COVID
Yeah.
situation started?
So let me think. I want to say that shelter here started around mid-March, March 11, 12, something like that. I believe we might have been one of the first places in the U.S. to shelter at home. So at that time, let me just think for a second. I'm trying to remember exactly the sequence of events, but there was a time when, even though people were sheltering at home, it was somehow not. Sorry, that's my daughter. What is she? The mommy fake cat. Okay, so yeah, now I'm confused about the sequence of events, but I can tell you what I remember. What I remember is that there was at some point, students were told basically to stop going to class. Mm-hmm. Okay, and what my class was already recorded anyway. I was co-teaching a course, the intro algorithms course with Alessandro Chiesa. Mm-hmm. And the way we do it is, I'll teach for 2 to 3 weeks, and then he'll teach for 2 to 3 weeks, and we go back and forth. So at the time that happened, I was the one teaching. And even though students weren't coming to and our class is big, it had about 700 students.
Wow.
So we had it recorded. A lot of students watch it online. So what I did when I was lecturing at that time was, I talked to the cameraman, and he agreed to continue coming to record me. So I was basically lecturing to an empty classroom, and those lectures were being shown online. So I was still going to the same building. And then at some point they locked the building. And then at some point, because even with the shelter at home, there were certain exemptions where I think one specific exemption was for distance education. Like if you were doing things to allow people to get their education online, you were allowed to continue doing it. So even with shelter at home, I was allowed to do that, like go on campus and record. And then locked the building. Actually, they locked the building when the lecture switched to Alessandro Chiesa. So he had to deal with that. He just basically changed it to the CS building. Before we were lecturing in another building, and the CS building was still like, we had key access to it, so we could still get in. And then when it was my lecture, again, what I did was I reached out to the cameraman and I said, look, like, I'm willing to do this, either way. Like, does the following way work for you? Let's just pick one day and just marathon record all my lectures for the rest of the semester. And he was fine with that, so I did that.
Wow, that must have been one deadly day.
Yeah, I mean, I think I only had 3 remaining lectures.
Okay.
Each one was an hour and a half, so it was about 4.5 of hours of back-to-back lecturing. But we did it. Yeah.
And then evaluations, etc., were also done, or was that sort of you just gave simpler grades this time?
We still had homeworks. We still had a final project. The biggest changes were to the exams. So we already had one. So the format of the class was supposed to be, in terms of exams, 2 midterms and a final. Mm-hmm. Midterm 1 happened before COVID. Midterm 2 was supposed to happen right around the time that they started banning flights and like recommending that banning flights to Europe and to China, and you shouldn't fly in general. So a lot of students, I think it was basically like within days of like when they were banning flights and when the midterm 2 was supposed to happen. So a lot of students decided like they want to go home. Mm-hmm. So they had to pack up all their stuff in their dorms and their apartments and go, right? And that was supposed to be their study time. Yeah. So students brought this to our attention. They said, like, we don't feel like we have adequate time to prepare for the exam because we're busy packing up all our stuff. So we delayed midterm 2. And we also basically, due to cheating concerns, we made it so that it was basically a big homework. Okay. So it was take home. You could collaborate with your peers because we had no way to control collaboration. Yes. Our initial plan was to actually do Zoom proctoring. Mm-hmm. So, we had quite a large teaching staff since we had so many students, and we're going to make many different Zoom chats and then partition the students into different Zoom chats. And then each Zoom chat would have a couple TAs who would monitor things. Students would have to take the exam with their camera facing their pen and paper and share their screen, things like that. Campus, though, was uncomfortable with video proctoring. So they actually told all courses that we're not allowed to do it. So when they told us we're not allowed to do video proctoring, that's when we decided to just make it a take-home collaborative thing. And then for the final exam, usually for the algorithms course, the exam questions are more like short answer, like proofs, things like that. So what we did instead, what we decided to do also to help thwart cheating for the final was have a large question bank, and then each student gets a customized exam, which is a random sample of questions from the bank in random order. Mm-hmm. So that it changed the style of exam, but that's what we did.
That's pretty cool.
And and it was great. I mean, the teaching staff, the TAs were amazing. I mean, they were so dedicated. I don't think I've ever seen TAs who were so
wow.
really they were so on top of things. So I'm very grateful to them.
That's amazing, actually, because over here we basically couldn't tutor beyond a point because students went home, and few students actually don't have connectivity once they they don't have maybe computers, or yes. If they have computers, they don't have fast internet. So it's sort of over time it became clear that if we continue to do this, around 20% students will be basically left behind.
So what did you do for exams? Just no exams?
We evaluated based on whatever we had done by the time the lockdown started.
Got it. Okay.
There is an option of awarding just a pass and fail sort of a grade.
Yes.
And also for students, So some instructors, if they feel they've done enough in their part of the course, then they are allowed to give out a letter grade like usual, but
Yes.
students still have the choice of converting it into a pass or satisfactory, not satisfactory grade.
Got it. Actually, the same thing here at UC Berkeley. Professors, I think, were never allowed to choose. It was all up to the students. And students could do it on a course by course basis. They could say, like, for this course, I want it to be pass fail.
Yeah.
So I don't remember the percentage, but the vast majority of students in our course chose to have it pass fail.
Oh, okay. That's good to know. I mean, I'm planning to go the pass fail route maybe, but I'm not yet decided. So we have till 30th of June to still do grading actually.
Okay.
Because
Our semester is over now.
semester is not officially over, yes. Though
Okay.
teaching is kind of over.
Got it. Okay.
And
Yeah,
sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think our final exam was May 15th, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
And we submitted final grades a few days after that. So we've been done for a couple of weeks now.
Yes.
You're about to say something.
I was just going to ask you about your PhD student and your postdoc that you earlier mentioned. So are
Yes.
you doing well through this, or how much are you sort of instrumental to their progress right now, or how much are you feeding off each other in some sense?
Right. I mean, I guess the last meeting I had with my PhD student, he's still here in Berkeley. He's from China. And I think there are issues with him going home now, because if he did, the things would be, he would have to get a new visa to come back to the US. And I believe the embassy might still be closed. I don't know if you know, but also if you look at the White House, there's some announcement on the White House website that they have some new executive order concerning students from China who want to come to the US for graduate study. Also, people who want to come from China to the US for postdoc. So it's unclear how they're going to interpret this executive order, but I mean, the gist of it was, if you have, so experience working for the military, it's more than the military. There's some specific program that they name. But if you have experience working under that program, then you're banned from being able to enter the United States on a non-immigrant visa, like a student or a J1. But also, if you studied at an institution that receives funding from this program, then you're also banned. So, I mean, the thing about that is, I don't know exactly what it's like at Chinese universities, but in the United States, pretty much every major research university has tons of researchers getting funded by the Department of Defense, right? DARPA. I actually have funding from the Office of Naval Research, part of the Navy, right? So the U.S. military. So I wouldn't be surprised there are many, Chinese universities like Tsinghua, Peking, et cetera, that have researchers getting funding from the Chinese military, right? Mm-hmm. So are they going to ban any graduate of Tsinghua from getting a student visa to come for graduate? I don't know. I mean, so yeah, I guess time will tell. We'll see what happens with the fall semester. I mean, the theory group has one student who is admitted who's coming from Beijing, actually. So I don't know. It's a little bit to read some of these what's going on.
Yeah,
but yeah, so the student, last time I talked to my student, he said he was doing fine. But he's in his apartment in Berkeley. My postdoc, since everything is online now, he decided to work from, I guess, another city. So he's not in California right now, but it's all the same since everything is Zoom now anyway.
Yeah. I see. Great. So that's good. And do you sort of have some sort of advice for students, or is there something that comes to your mind as a generic advice? Because I think graduate students everywhere are sort of feeling a bit of anxiety or a bit of, this is quite an unusual situation. And even while doing a PhD, we are always sort of unsure about what's next and so on. So is there something that you kind of told other students or would like to tell other students?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would just say to make sure to try to stay engaged and I know that here at Berkeley, the student, they started a new Slack, and they also started some social events on Zoom. Like they, at least once a week, they eat lunch together with the on Zoom with the camera facing their meals. So that's things like that. I think are good to do.
Oh, that's a great idea, actually. And how do you see theory C as changing, or it helping the change, or it changing because of the current situation?
Oh, it changing or helping to change? I'm trying to think. I amongst just my friends or people I usually interact with who are theorists or there's one guy I know. He's a math professor. He's not a TCS person. His name is Po Shen Lo. He's at CMU. He started this contact tracing app called Novid. I think it's novid.org, or just Google Novid. It's like COVID, but with an N.
I'll check it out.
So it's an anonymous contact tracing app. So I know there are people, people like him who are doing things to help with the effort. Most people I know, though, are just doing research as usual. I guess we're also lucky as theorists that we don't need to go into like a physical lab, right, and do experiments, which some of my colleagues.
Keeping the show going is also, I think, keeping the show going is also a part of, what we should be doing, in the sense of, in the world where everything is going to go back to normal, we better be still sort of engaging in we know how to. And so just to wrap it up, say, what are the things that you are most excited about in your work or in the problems that you're looking at?
Yeah, so I'm still looking at kind of sketching, streaming stuff. That's been, I guess, my main focus for a lot of my life lately. We just sent something to me and a student, not my own advisee, but another graduate student here at UC Berkeley. We sent something to NeurIPS yesterday. They extended the deadline to tomorrow, actually, but we were still operating under the old deadline, so we got it done earlier. That was on basically approximate distance estimation with adaptive queries. So, when I say adaptive queries, we all know that when you have a Monte Carlo randomized algorithm or data structure, you're not allowed to feed it inputs that are correlated with the internal randomness of the algorithm, right? And all bets are off as to correctness.
Right.
But let's say that you want to do that anyway. You want to be able to have a data structure where you ask it, you ask a query, you get a response, and then based on the response you get, you choose what your next query will be, right? And if your data structure is deterministic, that's no problem. You can do that adaptively. But if it's Monte Carlo, then it's a problem. Even if it's Las Vegas, then your expected runtime might not be as good as you want if it's adaptive, right? So we just give like somewhat generic, pretty simple but generic idea for transforming Monte Carlo data structures into ones that can support adaptive queries. And then in the submission, we apply that specifically to the problem of you have a database of vectors, and then when a query comes, you want to estimate its distance to all the vectors in the database.
Nice.
So you want to do this adaptively. So turns out you can do this with non-trivial non-trivially good performance.
I see. And non-adaptive, in the non-adaptive model, was something already known about this, or
Yeah, so non-adaptively, there are sketching methods, right? You can just normally to compute the distance, let's say some LP distance, to compute the distance from one vector to another would take d time. If you sketch the vectors ahead of time, let's say then you can sketch the vectors down to constant dimension and get a good constant approximation, right, in constant time.
Right.
Also, there have been some works of there's a paper by Tal and Wagner or not Tal Wagner, Tal Wagner, Tal Wagner and Peter Indik. I just said, his first name and his last name now. So Indik and Wagner. So Peter Indik, Tal Wagner on data structure for distance estimation, which also is, for non-adaptive queries.
Cool.
And there was follow-up work with them together with like Ilya Rasenstein. So that was not sketching based. They were focused on bit complexity and basically getting as tight a space bound as possible.
Mm-hmm. Nice, cool. And NeurIPS is going to be online this time, or have they already decided?
I don't know if that's decided yet because NeurIPS is not until I think December.
Right.
I believe it's scheduled to be in Canada, maybe Vancouver. I don't remember. It's on the website. Yeah.
What do you feel about all these conferences going online? Is it? Do you think you're liking that?
It makes sense, I guess. I know like Stock's going to be online. iClear I was looking forward to it. I've never gone to iClear before, but I'm half Ethiopian. I have relatives in Ethiopia, and iClear was going to be in Ethiopia. So I thought this is a historic moment. It was going to be the first major, international CS conference in Ethiopia. So I registered, I was ready. I bought a plane ticket. And then once they announced that it was online, I ended up just canceling and not doing it, not going. But yeah, I guess, it's understandable why people are moving online, but I like the in-person conferences better.
Yeah.
Some people don't. Some people say it's like a waste of time, like flying somewhere very far for 2 days. But actually, in my experience, I've had I'd have to think about. Yeah, no, it's true. I've had several, I think, good projects come out of collaborations that started at conferences. Right? You meet people in the coffee breaks or at lunch or whatever, or over dinner, and you start talking about problems. So.
Yeah. Personally, for me also, I feel like going to I may not get so much from the talks, but it's just, I like to talk to people, and then you can, think of something nice you can do together. So that has worked out in the past for me.
Yes.
Yeah. So I hope that we come out of this soon and things go back to normal. But thanks for chatting with me. It was a lot of fun.